Good afternoon and welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. Double D in a hot seat. I need no introduction given what I'm wearing, but I am joined by, and I have to say, this is like a veterans panel here. These are the tenured Axomers that we've got on here. Look at this. And by that, guys, I don't mean it with the old guys, right? I just mean that we've been on here for a while. But I am joined by Giggsy the Poet and Kev Graham. We've got the Axom's own publican and Lawrence Conley, and of course we have Ian Conroy, or Ian Down Under, as we refer to him. But yeah, great to see you guys. It's been a while since been on with you lot. Paul John is still holidaying himself. There are some rumours that he was spotted wearing a leopard skin thong and a pair of Crocs. We've been unable to substantiate those rumours, but we are looking for video evidence. Apparently I have switched. Somebody's switching the screen. Kev, I'm blaming you for that. No, unless Paul
nothing
John
to do with me. Nothing to do with me. I was trying to sort my microphone, so if I have press on there, I apologise.
Maybe messing with our settings. If the screen goes funny, guys, just let us know in the comments. It is, as somebody has rightly pointed out, in fact, I think it is indeed our resident first commenter, and it's Jungle Lion. Lots of rumours today, mad silly season this year, and to be honest, we have been, as a team, we have been linked with, it feels like just about every up-and-coming young winger in Europe at the moment and beyond. We've also got some outgoings to talk about, a few confirmed deals, ones that we've known about, ones that have, we've expected for some time, and maybe ones that are a bit more speculative. And on top of that, the boys have been back in training again. One of our own, Kieran Tierney, been getting a lot of praise for his attitude in training. Although anyone who's watched the video is kind of like, come on, KT, hold back a wee bit. We don't want to injure our own players before the start of the game. And if we get through all that, we've also got the Cork City game later tonight. Quite a historic game. Apparently, this is the first competitive, I know it's a friendly, but it's first competitive football or soccer match at the Super Value, and I'm going to attempt to pronounce this, so guys, don't dig me out in the comments if I get this wrong. But it's the Super Value Park y Chomí, I think is around about the right pronunciation for that. But if I didn't get that right, don't blame me, blame Google. But it's a 45,300 stadium in the city of Cork, third largest Gaelic Games stadium in Ireland, and generally all the events that are held there tend to be Gaelic football or hurling, including the Cork Hurling Championship. So hopefully a good atmosphere there tonight, and hopefully we put on a little bit of a show. Gents, I've not spoken to you about the first friendly that we played against Queen's Park. So Kev, what were your thoughts on the game? It's definitely getting a bit of a mixed reaction. Some people saying a bit too negative, not enough ambition. Other people saying, well, it was a good fitness workout. How did you view it?
You'd be as well moving on. I never saw a second yet.
Did he see a second of it?
So I have no opinion whatsoever.
Many people in the comments would probably say you didn't miss much. Let's put it that way. It was very much a bit of a pedestrian. Lawrence, did you manage to catch any of the game?
Yeah, so some of it, mate. I don't know. Some young boys got a run out. John Kenny got a goal. We played the style of football we play. It's something we're going about, that the club needs a consistent style of football. I suppose it's exciting, probably not, but yeah, I wouldn't read too much into a pre-season friendly against Queen's Park. I know beating Queen's Park's not for everyone, but thanks to Johnny, we managed it. The players seem to grasp the horseshoe football and change the point of attack. But yeah, it's pre-season. We always lose a pre-season cup.
Listen, don't denigrate the pre-season cup. If Rangers win that, then they'll have that in the trophy room. So I think a lot of people felt that there was too much of similar style of football to what we saw towards the end of last season. Ian, that's been a bit of a concern as we come into this season, but we are at least seeing some movement in the transfer window. We did moves early with KT coming in. We've had Benjamin Nygren coming in. So I just need to bring this up before I get to that point. Somebody is pointing out that was a dreadful attempt at pronouncing the word. So thanks for that, Urban. That makes me feel great. It wasn't my fault. That was blame Google. But some of the players been linked with at this point, Ian, not really getting fans off their seat. We've been linked with 2 loans for Shin Yamada, as young Japanese striker. Liam's done a blog on him recently. I don't think he's put up the best numbers recently. He had a decent season a year ago. And also Giuseppe Ambrosino, who is a Napoli under-21 player, not played in Serie A, but got a fairly decent record in Serie B and at youth level. 2 forward-going players. we're also seeing names like Scott McKenna, Tyrell Malacia, Justin De Haas, who myself and Colin spoke about yesterday, big centre-back defender, and another big defender, Etienne Ute from Le Havre, who's entering the last year of his contract. Another 6'5" centre-back, formerly part of the Inter Milan youth setup. How are you feeling about recruitment so far, Ian? I mean, we've got a big qualifier coming up. Confident doing the right business, or do we need more?
Well, I think we could probably just take a snapshot from this time last year and the year before. I think this is my third pre-season now on Acsom, and it's kind of similar vibes, really. I can imagine we'll sort of leave it to the last minute again to make any signings that of any note. Pretty underwhelming, really, in terms of what's coming so far. And I think this was the key message that I'm sort of seeing, really, or reading between the lines, is that these don't seem to be Brendan Rodgers signings. Apart from Negren, which he came out and sort of said that was a tip-off from Michael Essien, one of his former players at Chelsea. So he looks good. I think he looks like the type of player that we've been looking for, and sort of number 10 rather than a winger. In terms of the other players, I'm just wondering, modern football, it's heavily reliant on stats rather than, I think, back in the day it was always you have your scouts in certain areas and they do the eye test. And if it's worth going back, they go back and go back and go back. And then ultimately, if it was a definite possibility, then the manager would go and do his due diligence as well.
Yeah.
I know as recently as Neil Lennon, that seemed to be the way they were doing it. Big Johan. That was kind of the rigor of the sort of the scouting philosophy, really. In modern times, it's kind of it seems to sort of have gone away from that, and I don't know how heavily involved Brendan is in any deal, really, whether it's seeing it on a video or whatever, if he actually goes out and sees these players. So yeah, to answer the question, really, at the moment it's pretty underwhelming, and to me it points to the fact that Brendan's not going to be here next year.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of people making that same, speculating around the same on that, Ian. So as a shared view, Kev, we've seen a few players go now. We'll talk about Nicholas Kuhn in a minute, get your thoughts on that. But we've seen Mike Nawrocki go off. That one actually has caused a bit of division within the fan base. A lot of people feel as though he didn't get a fair crack at the whip with us. Lagerbielke looks to be off to Braga. I'm not sure if that's been finalised yet, but it certainly looks imminent if it hasn't happened. And Stephen Welsh also been linked back with a move to KV Mechelen, where I think he played last season. Now, a large part of the criticism directed at the squads last year was that we didn't have good enough strength and depth, and the centre-back area was one of those areas that was mentioned. Now, we've seemingly moved out three of our, very much our periphery centre-backs. That leaves us with Carter Vickers, Scales and Trusty, and also, although it doesn't look as though he's first team ready, but Anamura as well. It's really an area we need to improve, but is that an indication to you that the manager's got trust in Trusty, as it were, to play that centre-back in Scales as being the obvious partner for Carter Vickers, or do you think he's still looking to get somebody in there to take that second starting berth?
I would hope that he's when you say he's got trust, I mean, he signed Austin Trusty, so he obviously backs him. He knew Trusty for his time in England, spent money on him, so he's going to get another opportunity no matter what we think. It's a manager guy, it's a manager's player. Same with Big Scales, whatever your opinion of Scales and his obvious limitations, the manager trusts him to do certain things in certain games, and that's it. I still think there's a massive question mark over whether Cameron Carter Vickers will be here on the 1st of September. So, and if that's the case, I do expect them to bring in another centre half, but that won't be done till later on in the transfer window, until probably Cameron Carter Vickers leaves. With regards, I'm not counting Anamura. I very much doubt I'll ever see him in a Celtic jersey. If he spoke up Dane Murray as well. Yes. So I would want to bring in another centre half, but I do think that the bottom line is that he will have another go with Trusty, because he is the manager's man. And if you have a look at the two guys that you mentioned there, Narovsky and Lagerbielka, they were brought before Rodgers came to the club. They were scouted before Rodgers came to the club. He came into the club. He did sanction them on the belief that everything had changed and the scouting system was better. He took one look at them, decided he didn't fancy them, and just discarded them. And you look at the guys, as Ian says, you look at some of the guys that were bringing in the new and some of the boys that were getting linked with, and see them just ending up in the scrap heap. The manager will have a look at them, go, I didn't fancy them, and he'll move on. Now, that's sometimes what happens when you're running with a sort of mad hybrid that we're actually running with, where we've got investments, and you've got a manager who basically wants guys who are out the packet ready. So some of these investments you'll probably never see if the manager just doesn't fancy them whatsoever. And the manager's got previous for no fancying what the scouting team give him.
Well, this is something that was highlighted, right? And I think Colin used the reference yesterday. He talked about the Shved situation in Brendan's first term. You know, he didn't seem to know anything about the player, was questioning why we were bringing in another winger at that point. Lawrence, you've always got pretty good insight into the recruitment process and how these things play out. But is there a concern when you hear the manager's comments after the Queen's Park game about Inamura, when I think a lot of us would view Inamura as being presented prior to signing as a potential first teamer? You know, he came in with the same sort of social media profile, you know, the here's a new centre back, number 25, this kind of thing. He came in very much presented as someone that was coming into the first team, but Brendan kind of kiboshed that with his comments post match, saying not ready for the first team, might go out on loan, we'll get a chance to have a look at him. Is it right to have a concern there that maybe we are seeing the disconnect between the club and the manager?
I don't think there's any disconnect on the Amura signing. I think he has been signing his investment. You know, he's a guy with potential. He's not costing us a lot of money. As a club, we need to make those type of signings, you know, to bolster our funds. Don't think anyone, the scouting team, thought he's going to come in and start. You know, I'm expecting 5 or 6 first team ready players to come in over the course of the transfer window before it shuts. I think we've got 2 of them in. We've got Tierney and Negrin. I think that's a cracking start this early the transfer window. And, you know, Inamura, he's a project signing. We do that. You know, Brendan said, look, there's potential, put him out on loan. We talk about players even coming through the ranks, need to get out on loan. If the team's seen some potential, and they think either he's potentially going to make it or turn a profit on him at some point. That's the type of business Celtic do. I don't think, you know, our main focus is wingers and up top at the moment. You know, we could do with bringing in more centre halves. I think, you know, for like, Dane Murray probably replaces Stephen Welsh. It leaves you Lagerbielka and Rocky to replace. I think Brendan wasn't impressed with Lagerbielka's pace in the game. And I think Rocky was just a fitness issue. He couldn't train at the level Brendan wanted him to train at. He's been moved on. But it looks like both of them, both those Lagerbielka and Rocky have been moved on. So I'd expect it to see us sign at least 1 centre half, if not 2. You know, Kev's touched on Carter Vickers. Will he be here? We know he's got his injury problems. He's one of the top 2 paid players at the club. If we're really going to progress in Europe, we need somebody that's going to be available for all those games. If we're paying you the top end to our salary, I don't think we can afford you to miss large parts of the season on the treatment table. So, I think I'd agree with Kev. I think I would, you know, towards the end of the season. After qualification, Carter Vickers to move on and maybe 1 or 2 centre halves to come in. 2 if Carter Vickers does move on. But I think we're looking at wingers and strikers just now. I think that's going to be a priority, bringing them in. I think the Antwerp deal with, is it Balakoisha? I think that's more or less done. It's down to the player. We're obviously looking at a few other wingers as well. Kuhn's off to Como. We've got money to spend. We know we need to replace. Jota's injured. You know, we've had inquiries about Yang. I think the guy's, you know, he's got the heart, he's got the work rate. It's just the skill with Yang, isn't it? I think that's what's missing. I think I've seen enough that, you know, if we get a decent offer that we're turning money in Yang just now, if we have replacements lined up, I'd be moving Yang on and bringing somebody else in and giving them a chance.
Yeah.
What I find quite interesting, sorry Chris for jumping
Okay,
in
go
there.
ahead.
What I find quite interesting there, Lawrence, what you actually mentioned was Lagerbielke, no pace. Well, who looked at him and says, well, he's going to fit the way that we play football. Same with Orowski, who looked at him and went like that, well, he can train at the level that Rodgers wants to do it. We should not be bringing in players that didn't fit the way that we play. And,
pace is the big one, isn't it? You know,
aye.
maybe you only find out training. You know, nobody's going to sell you a guy and go, he's garbage at training. Don't buy him from us. You know, we want your money. But pace is something you should have the stats on, isn't it?
There's got to be a wee bit of due diligence there for looking at the whole. Again, it's quite difficult because Narowski was a young guy. He still is a young guy, so there's a bit there. But even when you see Engels coming in, and it's quite clearly he doesn't suit the way that we play. It's very, very clear he doesn't suit the way we play. He was a right-hand-sided attacking midfielder. Then we go and spend £11 million on him, and you get guys like Alan Morrison, the data guys, going, he doesn't fit the way that we play football. And you're going, why is that? Why was he even? What box did he actually tick that he's ended up at the club? And I think that's where we see. Look, see these guys coming in like, aye, the manager's going to need to have a look at them. We'll have a look at them. I would hope that they have been watched in person. I would hope the manager, but they just didn't seem like the type that Brendan's actually going to hang his hat on. Even the guy for Antwerp doesn't seem like the kind of guy that he'll hang his hat on. And hopefully later on in the Monday we'll see guys you go out that is somebody that the manager really, really wants and he's not going to deal with it as a project. But then again, I speak to a lot of boys for the Anfield Rap and they says Brendan can't pick a player to save himself.
I think the point
There is
going to bring him in 4.5, and they'll be bringing him in knowing they can make 10 million on him. You know, I think it's that. You know, he's a winger, but short of wingers, he's off a level. Brendan will sanction that thing.
Just on Jeff's point there. Oh, go ahead. Ian.
Who since Brendan's come back, who's actually been his player, nailed on player? Would you say it's
Negrin? Definitely KT and Negrin, I'd say.
Well, KT, yeah, fair enough, KT. But other than that, I mean, this is his third season. It's kind of really, it's questionable how many are actually nailed on him, identifying and saying that's my guy. Maybe Nat Phillips.
I wouldn't expect the manager to identify too many of them. You know, he's a fairly busy guy. That's what you've got a scouting team for, to kind of put a selection of players in front of him. You know, he will identify the occasional player, but if you wouldn't expect your manager to identify every player that you're going to scout.
No, I think we spoke about it a bit yesterday, and the way we saw it is that there has to be a kind of almost a 3-stage process. No idea if this is the way, but this is the way you kind of envision it. You think there'll be a list of data, a certain set of kind of criteria and parameters that are set out by the manager and the coaching staff to the recruitment team. They go out and they get a raft of players who kind of fit that template to a degree. I think then what you'd expect to happen is that gets whittled down to maybe a short list. And then you're thinking the manager maybe has a final say on that shortlist and say, well, actually, he looks, you're assuming he's having more of a look at that point. Now, that is the process the way I see it in my mind working. But again, we don't have insight into whether or not that's actually the case. But you'd have to think it'd be if it's going to work, you'd have to have those elements.
But then, Chris, you have a look at the team. Right? Ian was going on about players that are Rodgers signing. Right, there's Kasper Schmeichel, Rodgers. All over, right?
Yeah.
So there's it. Either he wanted him after what he'd done on loan, he knew about the player when he came in on loan as well. Paulo Bernardo was there on loan when Brendan's I called him Brenda there. Brendan's first season, right? So Rodgers is obviously rubber stamped that when I want that guy. He's been here for a year. I've seen enough of him. I want him in the building. You look at the team that finished that cup final. So you've got Schmeichel, which is a Rodgers signing.
Yeah.
Alistair Johnson, which is a scouting team signing. If you actually have a look at it, Cameron Carter-Vickers is a bit of luck that we signed in the last day of transfer window when one of our centre halves got injured, who was being touted about to get away from Spurs. Liam Scales, Dermot Desmond, Irish connection, came in. So we'll give him at the scouting team.
He's actually said himself, Kev, he was ready to make the move to Aberdeen as well.
Okay. on your left back, you've got Greg Taylor, which is Neil Lennon scouting team again. The midfield, Engels scouting team. Callum McGregor's been there, and Bernardo was there. But then Bernardo wouldn't have been there if Hitati was fit. And where did Hitati come from? He was the previous manager who knew him and says, get him in, he can do a job. Kuhn, scouting team again. Maeda, again, previous manager, knew the player. And who was on the other side? Well, that bad, I can't actually remember who was on the other side.
We finished with Yang, I think.
Yeah. Right, but maybe what I'm trying to actually point out is the majority of our team are made up with signings that the manager knows.
Yeah.
And or the last two managers have known about it. And I think we can have a look at data and that all we want, and the analysis and all we want. Are we good at it? Who knows? Sometimes we feel like a blind man playing the puggies in Las Vegas. Let's just sign 8 or 9 and see how many actually work. Whereas our stalwarts of the team have all been manager picks over the last 4 or 5 seasons. So
I think it's a fair point. I mean, I think you're always going to carry an element of risk with signings, right? There's always a risk that a player's not going to work out, is not going to be able to adapt. You know, they come in with a profile. I always remember Juninho coming in under Martin O'Neill after Larsson left, and young wee Brazilian guy, brilliant at Middlesbrough. You think that's a decent signing, just couldn't adapt at all to Celtic, and consequently never made it. But then you get the odds, as you say, you unearth the odd Jamie. And I mean, we have been quite, to Kev's point, we've been quite lucky with certain signings. None of us knew about Jota before he arrived. Came in, absolutely brilliant player. We trusted Ange to bring in the 3 Japanese boys that are, were largely stalwarts. Obviously, Kyogo now off to Birmingham from a rough period in Rennes, but Maeda and Hitati very much embedded into the current Celtic team. And even when we joke about the Brendan, the phone book, he's got Kasper Schmeichel. Well, Kasper Schmeichel came in and played a great first season, and could potentially go on and do it again. Then again, you'd look at maybe a Schlipp and say, was he the same, and didn't really work out. So I think there's always going to be an element of risk. But what you want a ratio where your signings are more successful than less successful. And I'm not sure we've had enough of that over the past few years, have we?
That's how you judge success. Set a ton of profit, most of them. Trophy cabinet's full. Unlucky what won another treble. Signings that's come in, I think, would make money in Engels if we sell them. You make money in Carter Vickers. How is it you're judging success? Certainly on the football side, we went further in Europe. We didn't win a treble. A lot of people say that.
You're judging you're judging Bissek's success by no bringing on Yang and Luke McCowan in a cup final to try and win it for you.
I think McCowan's on for injury, so Yang's on for injury, aren't they? We can't sign him. I don't think we can afford to have the squad full of players earning what Jota's earning or costing. So at injury, you can happen at any team. You're going to have to put on, I suppose, your lesser players. For what we played for McCowan, did they do as a turn? The only domestic trophy we didn't win was the cup, and you're probably down I'd put that down to Schmeichel, to be honest, which is a manager signing. Whether Schmeichel's been a success or not, I thought Sinisalo's been great in the period they got, but I think the thing that stopped the treble was a manager signing Schmeichel. I don't think it was Yang or McCowan. It
was Yang when he burst into the box and couldn't cut back the ball.
Schmeichel sells a goal.
He does. He does sell a goal, but that was it. Schmeichel's one of the major reasons that we progressed in Europe.
It was a combination of
Yang,
things.
no?
I think it was a combination of things not going well. I think the point that you made, Kev, which is a good one, is that the squad that finished that cup final, or the team that was on the part that finished that cup final, didn't have what we would view as the requisite quality to win that match. When we needed that, you're looking at the bench, and each time a player's coming on, the quality did seem to drop. I'm keen to get a comment in, because I think this is actually quite pertinent to what we're talking about. So it's a good one, and it comes from Henke, and it's: are we any clearer on if Rodgers is leaving or staying? We can't afford this season to be a stopgap, signing players just to get us through this season. If he's not staying, we need to start planning. Ian, what's your thoughts on that? Is there a sense that the manager may be gearing up to leave at the end of the season, in which case are these signings that are viewed as a longer term? Are they really in the manager's plans, or is is this the club just looking for a buffer for whatever next manager comes in?
I personally, I've got a feeling. I'm not a clairvoyant, but I have a feeling that this will be his last season, and whether that was always part of his plan, that he just wanted to come back and have that kind of redemptive, aspect to sort of making amends with the fans that were upset with him. Lots of us were, some more than others, of course. But so whether that was his plan and he was definite and that was it, he was only going to do the 3 years, or whether it was kind of open to suggestion, whether he was going to suck it and see really, and see if he had to correct back and see this as his family life being in Glasgow. He said it himself, he's got a lovely life in Glasgow. It's his club. I said a while back I'd like to see him do 5, 6, 7 years, build some kind of dynasty.
Yep.
And then I think if he progressed year on year, or kept his punching in Europe every year, I see him going to a pretty high caliber of a job in Europe, for example. If he did that with us, and kind of he built that credibility back, so we were actually we're expected to be in Europe every year and doing all right. So I've got a feeling that he's going to be leaving. But I've said this before as well. We've just been, I suppose, the sum total of our ambition, or the board's ambition, has been just to see that one step ahead of Rangers, and that's been pretty easy, really, considering that it's such a dysfunctional club since they were formed in 2012. Dysfunction, soft loans from directors, chucking money, basically paying money that the kind of wages that Celtic have been paying, and we obviously are on a sound financial footing. So that's with the new majority shareholders at Rangers, that's going to stop. So they're going to be semi-sensible, and they're going to be professional, and they're going to be run professionally. So that's maybe this year, we won't sort of see the big effects of that. But certainly from next season, that's going to be a real tangible threat. And then on top of that, we have Tony Bloom at Hearts, who's just put 10 million in, and also Bill Foley at Hibs. He started slowly at Bournemouth, but he's doing really well at Bournemouth as well. So these guys are no mugs. So Dermot Desmond's not the only billionaire in town, and it's I'm sure there's a large amount of ego that's at play with all people who've reached that level in life. So do we up our game? Do we have the minerals to up our game? Do we have the personnel at that boardroom level to up our game? I don't think so. I think if they were fresh, keen young Turks, they would. But I think they're stale. I think that it's an echo chamber. I've used that term many times before. I think it's an echo chamber, and with the best will in the world, you need to refresh. You look at Alex Ferguson when he was at Manchester United. I know he was pretty hands off, and he allowed his coaching staff to do that. But he refreshed his coaching team every so many years. Yes. So the message was changed for the players, so it kept it interesting. Obviously, personnel changed with the players as well. But I think any department in any company, really, you need fresh ideas, just to keep that keep things from going stagnant. And I think things have gone stagnant. So whether it's a case of we're sleepwalking into maybe losing our dominance, or whether the board are attuned to it, they know far more than I do, and they're already sort of being proactive behind the scenes to make sure that we do stay at the top of the pile.
Yeah, I think you make a couple of good points that resonate. I think in terms of are we sleepwalking? Is this do we have enough long-term planning? I'm going to bring a couple of comments, and then there's another discussion point I want to bring in. But Barca Boy comes in and says, "No one knows, we're all guessing," which is 100% right. Right, we are absolutely guessing. We're speculating because we don't know, but there is a lack of transparency. Now, Kev, what I want to consider for a second is I want to take a look at our things from the club's perspective. So look at it from a different side for the manager. If the club have any indication, for example, that the manager is not going to stay beyond this season, would there then be a decision have to be made to say, well, we're not going to spend big money on players for one season, even though we want to go in and progress in Europe and do all that sort of stuff? We're not going to spend big money, because what happens at the end of the season, we have to bring in another manager, which will cost, and then that manager comes in and rips things up and says, all these players he spent money on last season? I don't want them there. I want my own guys. Is there a concern maybe from the club's perspective that we don't necessarily always give credence to say, do you know what? Because the manager's not committing, we can't commit to the manager's long-term plans, as it were.
There could well be. As I say, we seem to run this quite mad hybrid. Most football clubs actually do run that as well, but our manager seems to have... He's a big personality in the place, and rightly so. He's a big person, and he gets the final say over things, and he will be saying no, and he will be saying yes, and he'll be saying, I want this and I want that. Ange had the exact same run of things. And when you look back on it, Ronnie Dyler didn't have that run on things. Neil Lennon didn't really have that run on things as well. It's when there's interference from above, we kind of falter. And when the manager hasn't got that final say, that seems to falter. So there could well be that the club, when you look at these investments and the players that have been linked with investments, are maybe looking to going down a more coach route. If Rodgers is not going to sign another deal, I didn't believe that to be the case. I think if my main worry is if Rodgers. There was an interview yesterday, I think, and he was talking about Johnny Kenny, and he says to Johnny Kenny, "You sign a new deal, then we'll have a look to see what we're going to do with you. We'll have a look at you in training. We'll have a look to see if we can send you on loan, blah, blah, blah." If I was Johnny Kenny, I would turn around and go, "You sign a new deal, and then we'll talk."
Well,
Because what am I going to do signing a new deal when you're promising one thing and you're going to be here in 12 months' time? Or then Johnny Kenny might be going like that. Well, I will sign a new deal because I know for a fact you're not going to be here in 12 months' time, and I might get another shot with another manager who quite likes me. So I did find that a bit ironic that Rodgers asking a player to sign a deal when he's in the last year of his contract as well. I did find that. If you look at the managers that have been successful over the last 10 years, they've all been Dermot Desmond picks, and they've all been powerful guys, big personalities. And I can't see that changing. I can't see us going to a head coach route with a sporting director above, because we're just not built that way. We're really just not built that way whatsoever.
Yeah,
there will be a personality manager again. So...
Well, that'll be interesting to see. I just think it's sometimes we don't necessarily take that other perspective. You know, it's very easy for us to criticise the club and the board. And listen, I've done it to a great extent as well, because of what you don't see. But I guess when you look at their position, they're thinking, well, we might have to back another manager next year, Lawrence. So therefore, we might actually, be a bit more reserved or do what we need to do. Project signings tend to be low risk, right? We talk about Anamura. Well, he maybe would fit the mould of a player that many managers could develop. So not necessarily someone for this season, as you've said. But what's your view on that? Do you think we sometimes give the board a little bit of a hard time? I mean, a lot of people are saying in the comments, and I'll bring a few comments up shortly, that Brendan did say he would commit to being here for the 3 years. He's not obviously signed the new deal. He's not really given an indication one way or another. But from a purely contractual standpoint, this at this point in time is his final year, right?
Listen, managers change all the time in football. Whether of their own volition and seeing out the contract or getting sacked because things aren't going well. Celtic's running as a business, and I don't think they're going to stop because the manager might leave in a year. Thinking when we replaced Martin O'Neill with Gordon Strachan, the board had done all that work in the background.
Yeah.
And got a decent manager in it to replace with more than decent, 2 last 16s in the Champions League. It might be the difference though between 2 Engels level signings and 1 Engels level signings in terms of transfer spend. In terms of quality of player, Tierney was done, early, but he's walking in, he's the best player in the squad. So I don't think it's going to stop us spending big. It's just how big. I'd still expect somebody of Engels level to come in. I'm expecting 5 or 6 first team squad players in. I think we've got 2 in Tierney and Negrin. I think we've got an absolute steal in Negrin. Last year his contract, we've obviously taken advantage of that. Kieran Tierney freedom of contract. So in terms of money, I guess we've not spent whatever's been allocated in the budget yet. You know, moving players out hopefully increases that budget. You know, if we do get Lagerbielka, Welsh, Rocky away, you know, you could be adding 5 or 6 million on to what you can spend. Hopefully it goes to Brendan. We wait and see.
That's a fair point. Well, let's talk a little bit about the squad then, because obviously we have recruited in certain areas. You say we've brought in KT Lawrence, we've brought in Benjamin Nygren. Nygren comes in. I think the view is that he's more of a central midfield player, kind of classic number 10. Ian, we are already quite saturated in that midfield area at the moment. You know, we've got, just to run through a few of the first teamers, we've obviously got Kalmak, who seems to be, I think, a shoe-in, albeit we'll need to continue trying to manage his fitness and his appearance because he's so important. We've got Rio Hitati still at the club. Some speculation over whether that will be the case by the time the window ends. We have Arne Engels, record signing. We have Paulo Bernardo, who's been kind of on the periphery, but you know, is you know, a lot of people keen to see him in the team. We've mentioned Luke McCowan already, probably the you know, bit further down in terms of the pecking order there, but it's still very much a part of the first team squad. And we were fortunate enough to see a couple of appearances from young Ricardo coming through towards the end of last season. But that's at this moment in time, that's a saturated midfield if Brendan continues to play the same system. How do you see us coping with that? And is that going to cause a bit of problem for the manager to keep all these players happy potentially?
Well, that's part and parcel of being a big club, isn't it? Really. I mean, and that's assuming that we don't lose Hitati. I think there was some rumblings that maybe Hitati was that last season might have been his last, and he might have been looking for something for pastures new. So, assuming we keep Hitati, yeah, I agree. It's probably the kind of the best department that we have, the strongest department that we have. I was thinking, I said this quite a way back. It was just before we signed Arne Engels, and Derek Ray was saying, you know, he's German, based in Germany, I think, the German football expert, and he said his review of Engels before we got him was that he was a number 6 all day long, and I kind of tend to agree. I think a few people have said this over the course of the season. I think this season, obviously, he's still a young boy. You know, he's still kind of, you know, the youth team. He's the same age as some of our young bucks. Yep. Obviously, we're signing him for £11 million, which is not his fault. So. He's still got some growth physically, I think, to go. And I think obviously having that season under his belt and getting a good pre-season, I wouldn't mind seeing him as number 6 and maybe seeing Callum deployed a little bit further forward. I know that's been spoken about before. Callum naturally was that player until we lost Scott Brown, and then he sort of ably stepped in, obviously as captain, but also into that fulcrum position that Scott Brown occupied so well. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much work really that needs to be done in midfield. I think we're all right. I just think it's maybe just sort of some chess pieces moving around.
Yep. No, absolutely. Well, I suppose what we do want to see is more of a plan B. You know, certain games, maybe Europe or against certain opposition, where other players can come in and do a different job. Kev, one of the big talking points at the moment is what's happening up front. Kyo, one of our former players, still on, you know, pictures behind me here, Kyogo, off to Rennes. Was tough to see him go. It didn't really work out. He's now secured himself what looks like a pretty decent move to Birmingham. They're doing a bit of business this season. Is there a thought with you that we let Kyogo go too soon for one part, and then secondly, we've not really replaced him adequately as yet? And how do you see us going forward with that forward position at the moment? Because we've got Maeda, but we have got a big left-sided absence there with Jota being out, which Maeda would naturally fill. So how do we solve the striking problem at the moment? Do you see Ida as the number 1?
Well, to answer the first part of that question there was, did we let Kyogo leave too early? The answer is no, because he wanted to leave. And have we replaced him? Have we not replaced him? Yes, we haven't replaced him. So I think when you have a look at that, we haven't replaced him, and you would think that we would be looking to replace him in this window. The strikers that have been linked to in this window, and also the one that we've actually signed, again, are ones that need developed. And look, we can have a go. We can be unimpressed with these guys that we're bringing in. I think the days of us getting that box office signing are long gone now. It's always going to be guys that need to get developed. But the guys that we're bringing in look like they need more developed than other ones. And Rodgers is good at that. He is good at that. If the guy's got the right minerals, he can actually develop a player. If you look at the strikers that we're actually looking at, they're going to need to be developed. If we end up signing the Japanese boy Yamada and Giuseppe Ambrosino, I love that name, Ambrosino. That's just a right Celtic name. That's then you're probably looking at the Japanese guy going out on loan and possibly Johnny Kenny going out on loan, and that would still leave us 4 strikers because I'm counting Maeda as a striker. I do not count him as a winger. I think he's the best striker that we've got in the club.
Yeah.
So you've got Maeda, Ida, and one other, because we're not going to run with five strikers. So I think we should be looking for a box ready left winger. Rather than Maeda, and play Maeda through the middle, and I think maybe that decision's maybe been made, if you believe the rumours about that the Danish boy that's ended up signing for Norwich, that we were really interested in January, and now we're
come to that,
and now we're not interested whatsoever. So maybe that decision's already been made within the football department. Go right, rather concentrate on getting the quality in the wings, more creative guys, more guys that would get us off our seats, more guys that give us a bit of entertainment, and we'll put Maeda through the middle. That's what I'm kind of thinking anyway, because we're not getting linked with any big blockbuster strikers.
But Brendan's on record saying though it's easy to sign wingers than strikers as well, isn't it? He's come out and said that. So Maeda done a decent job. Maybe Tierney at left back will replace his energy in the left flank. Tierney can really get up and down, so I think he's probably right. Maeda's come in, he scored plenty. I think he'd have done well for a sub for the few minutes he got. And it is easy to sign wingers and strikers, and it costs less, which Celtic's going to love.
I would say it certainly seems to be an abundance out there we're being linked with. Just can you get a few comments in, so I'm going to bring up a couple just now. So on a Permo, so people have Goldfish selective memories. Engels got 6 man of the matches in 8 games mid-season. He did have a good patch there, but I think at the same time many people have spoken about maybe a slight drop off in form. And I think, interestingly enough, to your point, a lot of people that I've spoken to, including a couple of former Celtic alumni, even they don't know what Engels' best position is. A lot of people say, he looks like number 6, but actually he's got, traits that would feed more of a kind of attacking centre midfielder. So I think the positional thing has got merit. It's not just us that's discussing it. A lot of people are.
Sorry to jump in, right? Just a quick one, and this is kind of like it's a bit of a false equivalence, but it just popped into my head. Do you remember that 3-2 game, Celtic against Barcelona, when we were winning 2-1 at half time, right? And obviously that was like just pre-Harlem Globetrotter Barcelona, but they had Henry, Ronaldinho, right. Messi scored 2 in the game. And I was at the game, right? And it's like the player that stood out for me was Yaya Toure, and he was playing the 6. He was in that Barcelona team, he stood out for me anyway. He stood out, and obviously then he went on to City and he played as a 10, really, didn't he? And
it was very, very much the heart of the midfield, when
he lost it in the Premier League. So I think, especially in the modern game, you look at Rodri at Man City, a player that sits in the number 6. It doesn't just have to be like a destroyer, or I think they can have those other attributes as well and sit there and have that as another arrow, really, for the team. But obviously, fundamentally, they're sitting there. Because Engels has got that eye for a pass, but I think with the size of him, his height, he's over 6 foot, I think, isn't he? Yeah, I think if he bulks out, a la Kieran Tierney, when Kieran Tierney went away and came back and was, a man mountain. I think then maybe the influence of Tierney as well could add to that as well. But I think Engels, I really rate him as a player. I think he's a great player, and I hope we keep him for a good while because I think he's got a really high ceiling. Yeah. But I wouldn't mind, as I say, same dropping that 6 and being with the Yaya Toure of our
Yes.
particular Harlem Globetrotter set of players.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there was a couple of occasions last season that I've mentioned before where I felt as though he did his best work from a deeper position, but actually having that vision and that range of pass to play in our forward players who are using their pace to get in behind. And I felt as though we didn't utilise that enough. The one criticism I'd direct at Engels in that position is I sometimes think that he didn't use his physicality well enough. You know, he sometimes brushed off the ball a wee bit too easily. And
Yeah,
I think
he
you
needs
need
the ball
someone that can keep the ball. So you think you're right. One thing I absolutely think you're 100% right on, Ian. I don't think we sometimes see the best of players until they've had at least a season with us. That time to bed in, that time to get work under the coach with your teammates and really get comfortable in your surroundings. And we always forget, I think, Kev, you mentioned it earlier, Arne Engels is, the equivalent age of most of the guys that are playing in the B team at the moment, and yet he's made that step up. He's made that trajectory. So, I think we do need to be a little bit patient with the player.
He'll be he's the same age as Johnny Kenny, and we're looking to send Johnny Kenny back out on loan. So we have got to remember that what you're talking about there, the most impressive stuff. He done the most impressive stuff in Europe when against the better opposition. And also all the balls that you're talking about there, he played for a wide right-hand side, what he done with Augsburg. That's what he done with Augsburg. They were a counter-attacking time. His job was to pick the ball up deep and fire this ball down the wing for them to actually break in behind. That's what he did. And that's where he's been most impressive for us. When you see him against packed defences and that, he's just a bit safe and you just wonder, you're there to add a wee bit of creativity. He sometimes didn't do it. And I want him to improve in the second in this season. I really do. I really hope we do get a second season syndrome from him. And we go, wow, because he has got ability. The guy has got ability. But I'm just wondering, I just struggle at the moment to see where he fits in and how he's going to put that influence over that team. I get where Ian's coming from with the technical ability. But I don't think he uses his physicality well enough to be that number 6 at the moment. And when people were talking about Bernardo as well, again, I didn't really ken what his best position is either. When I saw him playing for the Portugal under I was going to call them the Portugal under 23s there, but they were actually under 21s, even though Paulo Bernardo's, is he not about 26, 27? No, he's only 24.
I think he's only about 23. I need to check that, but I think he's only about 23.
He's 24. But he was playing as an attacking right-hand sided midfielder for Portugal, and I'm going, I've never seen anything in his makeup of the game that can be a right-hand sided attacking midfielder. So I do think we've got a problem in the midfield, but I think it's more to do with the system.
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot of times on here about wanting to see some tweaks to the system. Lawrence, we've spoken about change of formation, bringing personnel in that just don't quite necessarily work in that situation. A lot of people spoke about Kyogo, just not enjoying playing under Brendan Rodgers because he wasn't getting the same sort of service, he wasn't getting the same sort of movement. It was kind of a bit more restricted. Is there a concern for you that the current system is too restrictive for some of the players we've got? And could you see players leaving and other players coming in as a result of that?
Players will leave, players will come. Happens. If Brendan's system wins us trophies domestically and it progressed us in Europe, I think Kev's right. There's definitely something wrong with the midfield. I think Hitati played every minute he was available, but I don't think he's that guy to play behind the strikers. I think there's something missing there, and I think we're probably missing a bit of bite as well. Do we have anyone that you would term a midfield enforcer? Listen, maybe Engels fills out, as Ian was saying. We move him to number 6 and he's a man mountain there and push Callum further forward. I don't know, that there's something that's not quite clicking with the midfield. Bernardo, with his injury problems, he's needing minutes, so is Engels. There's talk aside of Miller, there's another young player that need minutes. It's where they push them in. I think there's something wrong with midfield. Maybe we sign Josh Brownhill. I think he's still available on a fee. Can play with anyone in midfield. Gives a bit more experience there. Can play as an attacking midfielder. But there's something that wasn't just quite right with the midfield. So Brendan will be aware of that. He'll be looking to fix it. The players themselves will know that in a game. If if it's clicking properly or not.
I think, Lawrence, that we focus more on the midfield when the wingers fell out of form as well. And I think that's what happened towards the end of the season. All the wingers basically, one of them chucked it, as the other one just wasn't good enough. And you had Jamesy coming back in as well. And the fact that we're still talking about James Forrest contributing on a major scale probably says more about the lack of strength and depth that we've got. That we pushed Jota back very, very quickly, probably quicker than what we should. I ken that didn't he play any part whatsoever in his injury. Didn't he play any part? I'm not having any of that rubbish. Didn't he play any part in his injury whatsoever? That was a contact injury. But I think Rodgers realised that and he pushed Jota back. We need more creativity for the wings and we need more creativity coming from the midfield. But I think we focused too much on the midfield because the wingers completely fell out of form towards the end of last season. Where in the 3 months in the middle of the season when we were talking about going invincible, blah, 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 this and that, winning the Champions League and stuff like that, our wingers were absolutely flying. Yeah. Absolutely flying at that point. I would agree with that. Yeah. So as Lawrence has got a bit more info on me. If he says that they're concentrating on wingers and strikers, I can understand why, rather than looking in the midfield.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both Lawrence and he said. I think the midfield for me, I think the system is maybe too restrictive, but I think the personnel there, I think we've got good personnel in that midfield. So I'm not sure it'd be an area where now that we've got Negrin in, and I'm keen to see what the boys can do. I'm not too worried about adding bodies in there for the sake of having bodies. I think what we need is, you're right, how do we take the pressure off the midfield, Kev? And for that, you need the wingers to be on form. Because Kuhn dropped off, Jota was injured, Forrest came in, did a great job. Yang, I think we know the level he's at. So we definitely lost a great deal of quality towards the end of that season. I'll just go bring in some of the comments here. Andy Lee comes in and says, I think Engel's a class player, as is Bernardo. We just need to tailor the system to fit who we have rather than trying to fit players into a set system. I agree with that. I think that's a good comment. Steve-O comes in and says, sign players late, fans go mental. Sign players early, fans go mental. Maybe we're just mental, Steve-O. I think that's
but there's a level of player that you can get at this moment in the window.
There is,
and that's the players that we're bringing in. The ones that have got options and cost more money are not going to commit themselves coming to a Farmers League in the middle of July, the first couple of weeks in July.
Yeah,
they're going to wait to see what actually happens in August before they'll make that move. So we understand that. We do understand that, but there's got to be some indication. I still think we've got too many questions. I think the main question is our Rodgers. That is the main question.
Brown Warrior comes in to say Brendan's approach affected McGregor to too defensive and static, and Kyogo having to drop deeper and the slow ball getting to him more than most in his first season. However, Kyogo was off it this season. I think that's fair. I think Kyogo, as Kev said,
especially Kyogo, Andrew's quite happy to play everything through him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just get it Kyogo. Brendan likes to spread his goals throughout the.
He does. He's not a 30 goal a season striker, is he?
Aye. Maida gave it a go, didn't he? And he only played half a season as a striker. But I think it's just the style Brendan likes to spread it about the team, and whereas Andrew was more just get into the box and Kyogo will do the business. Yep. But even you'll remember Andrew at times had to tell Kyogo to stop dropping back to get in the box. Kyogo was not immune from criticism. But at the end of the day, he wanted to leave for sunnier climes in France. He's ended up from Champions League to Championship. He's now in Birmingham. So that's what I say.
I've still got a soft spot from Lawrence. I can't help it. Still like
Greg Taylor maybe, but Kyogo, you know what? He's came. He's went. And
there's Lawrence. He's gone. He's done. He's out. Brilliant. Bring in Green Mission here. We focus on recycling the ball too much sometimes. Should play direct and chase in for second and third balls. It's probing too much in the SPFL. It was a hard watch. It was interesting because that actually was what I felt the problem even in the game against Queen's Park when we had large, we only had a couple of the first teamers, but we had largely the youth. And it did seem very, very stagnant in terms of the way we played. I understand the manager's viewpoint. We always want the focal point of attack. But there were a couple of occasions, Ian, I noticed, and I don't know if you saw the game, but there were a couple of occasions I noticed where a young boy, Izaguzu, I think his name was, had the ball, line of sight of goal, and decided to pass it sideways. And I'm thinking, you're the point of attack. You need to be going straight ahead. But actually, that's a criticism we've directed at the first team last season as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I didn't see the game, so I didn't see that. But I suppose the philosophy for the first team should be the same for the B team and right the way through. I'm assuming that's how we do play. But for a young player to, I suppose, have the confidence, they've clearly got the skill to be in the team and be given a shot. I think it's probably a confidence thing, in a situation like that. So hopefully, that's a learning curve. So yeah, that's kind of what was the other part of the question?
I just think the system at the moment, there's too much side to side recycling the ball, passing at the moment, and we've got players that when they go a bit more direct are very, very capable. And I think for me it was also evident, it was coming through the B team, that it was the same sort of system. But we were very critical as fans of that horseshoe style passing last season. Yeah. If we go into this season and we're still playing that same way, even with the new personnel, fans will start to get a bit disgruntled, I think.
Yeah. I said it last week, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that Brendan will change his tactics about this season. I think the fact that we had a few bloody noses from the Rangers, from a pretty average Rangers team, let's be honest. Yeah. And I think essentially, and St Mirren did it. I know there's a few players that kind of were already in the beach against St Mirren at that final game when Calmat was going absolutely mad. Kuhn, I'm sure was one of them. Aberdeen obviously beating us in the final as well. I'm pretty certain that Brendan will mix it up. Obviously, we saw it in Europe, they adapted, but that was more to sort of maybe nullify a more of an attacking threat. But domestically, you need to change it. You need to freshen things. Brendan is a top class, world class manager in my opinion. I know that divides opinion, that one, but I think he's a world class manager. He's a fantastic coach. Whenever you hear about anyone that's worked with him in the past, you can't fault him as a coach, and he's meticulous. His attention to detail. So he hasn't got to where he's got to now in the game without being like that. So I think Brendan will mix up a little bit, and that'll hopefully allow players to sort of have that more of attacking threat.
Absolutely. We are getting close to time, guys. I do want to just talk about the Cork City game tonight. Obviously, it's at 6 o'clock kickoff. I'm not even going to attempt to repronounce the stadium after Plunge gave me a hard time. But it's another opportunity for us to maybe see a few of the first teamers in. I'm not sure what the projected lineups are, but also another opportunity for the young players to show what they can do. Somebody said they want a statement win of about, I think it was about 21-0. I'm not sure we're going to get that. But Kev, what are you looking to see over the course of the next few friendly games, including tonight? Is it for you more about just getting fitness, or do you want to actually see us show a bit of promise towards the end of, towards the start of the new season?
It's all about fitness. For me, I just want to go back to what Ian was saying.
Yeah,
when you have a look at this, our form, I think we only had a 60% win rate for January at the end of the season. Our form dropped off a cliff, and it went back to the sort of first 6 months of Brendan. So we've had a poor first 6 months, a great year, then we dropped off again. So Rodgers has got to know that, and maybe that's where he's talking about the freshness or something like that. With regards to his style of play, he's not going to change his style of play. It's still going to be possession based. Possession is king. We got the ball, the other team can't score. That's the way that he's been, and that's the way that it's going to stay. I just want to see the players be a bit more braver at times, and because when you look at that purple patch that we had at the start of last season, it was the players, Alistair Johnson bombing up and down the wing, and we were creating stuff. We were creating overloads and overlaps, and the players were being really, really creative, and that tailed away completely. And when it tails away, we're struggling and we're boring to watch. And we saw that towards the end of last season.
But Brendan says that, doesn't it, Kev? Brendan says he wants them to be braver, to be quicker. on the ball, to move it quicker. So, you know, it's
the-
no surprise
the-
the top manager knows our problems. But some of that's Kyogo leaving players checking out. The league was already done. You get knocked out of Champions League.
There's a lot of there is a lot of reasons for that happening, So, but it could be a worry if we start the season the exact same, and that's the worry. If we start the season the exact same, I mean, pre-season friendlies are all just about getting the guys up to speed, minutes. I think we had a great pre-season last season, and everybody, even when you hear guys talk about it, when we played Chelsea, the Chelsea players go, "That's a team that's ready for the season," and I think that's where we want to be by the time we get round to the 4th of August. Is it?
Yeah.
So I'm not really looking too much into the night. I think the team the night's going to be much the same as what it was on Friday night. Too many of the guys have just came back too late, so I don't think you're going to see anybody new the night that you didn't see on Friday night.
Yeah, which is fair. But either way, we'll be there to support it. Acsom will be going live. I think the game's on at 6, so we'll be on for about 5:30. I believe I'll be here. I'm not sure who's joining me. Possibly Paul John from the some sort of suspicious-looking toilet in Spain.
Colin's joining you.
Colin might be joining me, yeah, if he can. So, but yeah, we'll be there. We'll try and cover it. I believe the game is on Premier Sports and Celtic TV. So hopefully we get a few goals and a bit more entertainment. But listen, that's been an hour. We've had 1,300 with us. Really appreciate everyone who is joining. I know it's difficult during pre-season because sometimes we don't have a lot of concrete stuff to talk about, but we will always turn up and we will always try and break down what we see and what we know. So just a big thank you to Kev Graham, Lawrence Conley, and of course Ian Conroy, who always stays up late for these sort of shows. So really appreciate that as well. But guys, thank you very, very much indeed for your time today, and we will be back again later today at 5:30 for a Celtic State of Mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much.